How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Terrible Tribal, the series where I take some of the more obscure, underplayed tribes available in a historic format and put them to the test and see how strong that tribe can be. Before we get into it, I want to take a moment to remind you to like the video if you enjoy the content and want to see more of it. And if you have any ideas of a tribe you'd like to see me play, then feel free to leave a comment and I'd be more than happy to give it a shot. So, for today's tribe, we're going to be playing Advisors. Now, do advisors have what it takes in order to grind their way through the historic format? Let's find out. So for today's deck, we have one game plan, and that is to mill the opponent out, baby. If there's one thing that advisors are good at, it is definitely milling you out. Prime example for today, Persistent Petitioners. 2-drop, 1/3 human advisor. You can pay 1 and tap it, target player mills a card. Or you could tap 4 untapped advisors you control and target player mills 12 cards. And then a deck can have any number of cards named Persistent Petitioners. Now, Persistent Petitioners are going to be the backbone of this deck. We are running 16 of them to, 1, help us make sure that we have that mill 12 functionality available at all times. And 2, to just make the deck overall more consistent. Instead of playing a bunch of bad advisors that really don't synergize well with the rest of the deck, we're just going to play as many Persistent Petitioners as we can in order to go ahead and make our deck more consistent. Also in the 2-drop slot, we have Corrupt Court Officials. They are a 2-drop, 1/1 human advisor. When they enter, target opponent discards a card. Kind of a nice way to help attack the hand. Additional advisors to go ahead and put onto the board. And we can also kind of play our court advisors ahead of our Persistent Petitioners if we have them. So that way we kind of keep our opponent from knowing what we're doing a little bit sooner than that. In our 3-drop slots, we have Bruvak the Grandiloquent, 3 mana, 1/4 human advisor. If an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. So obviously the game plan would be to get Persistent Petitioners out as well as 2 other advisors, and then play Bruvak, making him our 4th, tapping all 4 of our advisors, and then milling our opponent for 24 in one go. Oftentimes, 2 mills with the Bruvak on the board is enough to get the game done. We're also running 2 copies of Grima Wormtongue, 3 mana, 1/4 human advisor. Our opponents can't gain life, which is pretty relevant considering how much life gain is in the format. We can also tap it to sacrifice another creature. Target opponent loses a life. And if the sacrificed creature was legendary, we can amass orcs too. The sacrificing of creatures isn't necessarily super relevant, but you never know when that 1 point of damage is going to matter and when those orcs might come in clutch. Then we're going to skip all the way to our 5 mana slot. And the only thing we have is the Mouth of Sauron. 5 mana, 3/4, human advisor. When the Mouth of Sauron enters the battlefield, target player mills 3 cards, then amass orcs X, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in that player's graveyard. So if we play Mouth of Sauron after we've done some milling with our Persistent Petitioners, there's a good chance that orc's coming in pretty big. As well as if Mouth of Sauron comes in while we have a Bruvak, that becomes a mill 6 as opposed to a mill 3, which only just adds benefit to the card itself. For support cards, we have 4 copies of Opt, just to kind of help us dig for a couple more advisors if we're a little bit light in the hand of advisors. 4 copies of Spell Pierce, just to kind of stop our opponent from doing unfair shenanigans, as well as a couple copies of Go for the Throat to take care of any big creatures that start posing threats to us. Another thing that advisors are good at is definitely blocking. Most of our advisors are 1/3s or 1/4s. Petitioners are 1/3s. We're running 16 of them. Bruvak as well as Grima Wormtongue are both 1/4s, and the Mouth of Sauron is a 3/4. So we're definitely good at blocking early game threats, but we're going to need those Go for the Throats to take care of some of those bigger things in the long run. Our land base is pretty simple. We have 4 copies of Watery Grave, a single copy of Takenuma Abandoned Mire, a single copy of Otawara, 4 swamps, 10 islands. We're really not getting too technical with the actual land base. We're just going to try to mill our opponent out as fast as we can and hope that gets the job done. So let's see if our advisors are good enough to get in there and get some games and rank us up in some historic. Alrighty. Terrible Tribal Episode 2. Advisors. We're going to try to mill our opponent out before they're able to kill us. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is an advisor's hand if I've ever seen one. We have 2 mana. Play our Persistent Petitioners. It's a bit slow. However, if our opponent is doing any kind of aggro shenanigans, Petitioners are very good at blocking. We really only need 1 more land in order to get the Bruvac down and get that first initial mill for 24. I mentioned earlier that usually if Bruvac can live and we can get 2 mills off of it, that'll pretty much win the game of itself. And then worst case scenario, we have Mouth of Sauron at 5 mana if we can get to that 5 mana. Or we could just get lucky and end up drawing another Petitioner or another Advisor and then just start milling them for 12. But overall, we're going to go ahead and keep this hand. Alright, we're going to go ahead and start off. We're going to play the Swamp first. You know, we would rather keep Otawara so that way we can channel it later. However, if we need to, we're just going to go ahead and play it as an island. Opponent goes ahead and Faithless Looting. They go ahead and pitch a Mountain and an Asushi, the Blazing Sky. We did not draw another land, so we're just going to go ahead and play the Otawara as an island. And then we'll go ahead and we'll drop down our first Petitioner. Now, even though we didn't draw that land, we did draw the 4th Persistent Petitioner, which means that once we get all 4 down, we can at least start milling. Okay, well, so much for that. Opponent abrades. We do draw another Persistent Petitioner. One of the upsides to this deck is really once you get to 2 mana, the chances of drawing your Petitioners are very high. So even if our opponent removes 1 or even 2, the chances of you just refueling your hand and getting more is pretty good. Opponent goes ahead and plays Fable the Mirror Breaker. We're going to go ahead and play another Persistent Petitioner. And we're just going to pass the turn. So if our opponent wants to attack with the Goblin, we'll double block, killing the Goblin. And then we can even leave up the 1 mana to mill our opponent for 1 card. 1 card really not going to make or break it, but every card matters in the end. Opponent plays a Swamp. And opponent plays the One Ring, which is fine. So the thing about the One Ring is it gains protection. It gives our opponent protection. However, I don't believe that actually matters with mill. I believe that if we mill them out, it still just gets them. So, yeah, I mean, funny enough, we really don't care about... Oh, I suppose we can't target them with the mill, though, there. That's fine. We'll go ahead and move on. So we draw a Watery Grave, which is nice. We'll actually take the 2, and we're going to play double Persistent Petitioners. Now we're going to go ahead and pass the turn and let our opponent do their thing. They'll take their damage from the One Ring, and the Saga is going to flip. Opponent goes ahead and draws some cards. So now we're in a position where we're just looking to go ahead and start milling them for 12. If our opponent has some sort of spot removal, then we're just going to go ahead and activate our Petitioners in response and just to mill them out. Opponent plays Kumano, faces Kakazan. We will go ahead and take a damage there. And another Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Opponent going to get another 2/2. Goes to combat. And passes the turn. So we're going to go ahead and tap 4 of our advisors. Target our opponent. And make them mill 12. We draw another land, which is good. We're going to end up playing that tapped. And we're going to play Bruvac, the Grandiloquent. We will go ahead and pass the turn, leaving up one of our Petitioners to mill, and then being able to tap the other 4 in order to mill them even more. So our opponent's going to possibly discard some cards to draw more. So opponent discards 2 cards, draws 2, puts a counter on the ring, and draws 3 more. Not sure what our opponent might be looking for. However, in most scenarios, if our opponent starts to pick off our team, we're just going to go ahead and activate in response. So there's a Kroxa. It's going to come back in with a 1/1 counter. So whenever it attacks or enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. Then each opponent who didn't discard a non-land card this way loses 3. So it's going to come in. I don't believe it's a May ability. So we do lose our Mouth of Sauron. And now we're dealing with the 7/7 Kroxa. Opponent has 1 mana, but he has 2 goblins that could attack to make treasure tokens if they want. So March of Wretched Sorrow. So we're going to go ahead and activate our Persistent Petitioner to mill them. And then we will tap 4 to mill them for another 24. Opponent is now out of cards. They can go ahead and attack, but we're just gonna live through the attack, pass the turn, make them draw nothing, and lose the game. GG's opponent. Good game. That is 1 victory for the advisors, baby. Alrighty. Game number 2 for the advisor mill. Let's see. So we're looking at 2 islands, Op, Spell Pierce, and 3 Persistent Petitioners. This is a definite keep hand. So we'll go turn 1. We will play an island. We're going to go ahead and pass the turn for now. Leave up Spell Pierce in case they decide to play anything that we're worried about. They play Selfless Samurai. Whenever you creature attacks alone, it gains lifelink to 1 a turn. You can sacrifice a target creature you control gains indestructible until 1 a turn. We're going to go ahead and just opt here. And we're going to put the other op to the bottom. We're looking for lands to try to draw our petitioners a little bit quicker. We do have plenty of petitioners to go, so we'll play the first one here. So once again, petitioner here is very good at just straight up blocking the samurai if we need to. Opponent goes to combat. Now, the petitioner lives here as long as there's no sort of combat trick, but we're also at a high enough life total where I don't feel like we really need to block at the moment. Opponent will gain 2. Pass the turn. Ooh, so we draw Brewvac, which is nice. So we play a second petitioner here. And then we're going to go ahead and pass the turn. So now we're leaving up Spell Pierce to stop any kind of shenanigans that they might have. And if nothing really happens, then we're just going to go ahead and use the petitioner ability to mill a card. Opponent grabs a swamp. So they're Mardu Samurai, I'm guessing. I'm guessing this may be like a Ishin deck. Opponent's going to go ahead and pass and move to combat. Opponent attacks. Once again, I'm not really worried about our life total at the moment, so we're just going to go ahead and take the 2. Our opponent can gain life all they want. That's fine. We're not really worried about life totals in the long run. We're more focused on just milling our opponent out. So we're not going to block here. We will just take the 2. Opponent plays Ishin. 2 heavens as 1. Can't really do anything about it, but we're going to go ahead and just mill them for 1 here. Okay, so we do draw a Go for the Throat, which can be useful later. We are just going to play another Persistent Petitioners, however. And pass the turn. So Ishin says if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Right now, the only thing that's really going to happen is the Selfless Samurai trigger. So we're not too worried about the Ishin at the moment. However, opponent has 5 mana and they have 4 cards in hand, so it's still yet to be seen what we're worried about. So opponent plays Ossification. So we can Spell Pierce here to make them use more of their mana. And possibly keep them from playing something else. I think we go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and Spell Pierce, make them pay more mana. That way we can hopefully avoid them playing something else as well this turn. They'll go ahead and take one of our Petitioners down, which is fine. And I think the hope is that we draw a land here in order to possibly pay 2 Petitioners next turn. So we're double blocking the Samurai in hopes to being able to kill it. Go ahead and Flame Blessed Bolt. So we're going to be down another Petitioner. We don't draw the next land, so we just play another Petitioner and pass. We leave up the 1 mana, that way we can mill them again. But we're definitely needing something. A swamp would be nice here. That way we can go for the throat this Ishin. Our opponent gets to draft a couple cards from Imperial Blade Master's spellbook. We will not block. We will take our beats. We're down to 10. We are definitely needing something soon, though. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. That is fine. We're going to go ahead and mill our opponent for a card. Draw a card. So we draw Watery Grave. Pay 2. We're going to go to 8 here. But we can play Petitioners. And we can pass the turn. We're going to stop at the beginning of combat. And then, I believe at the beginning of combat, we're just going to go ahead and kill the Ishin. So we're going to go ahead and go for the throat the Ishin here. See if our opponent has any responses to that. Alright, Ishin goes down. So our opponent has the Blade Master here. It's going to tap down one of our creatures. And unfortunately, opponent draws a Lightning Strike. So another Petitioner is going to go down here. So we're going to go ahead and choose to block. Oh, that's a bit of a punt, actually. I thought the Imperial Blade Master had first strike. It has double strike. So we're losing the Petitioner for no reason here. That's unfortunate. We draw another Petitioner, which I don't really know if it helps us out too much here. We pass the turn. Really, what we want here is maybe a 5th land to try to drop this Mouth of Sauron. It comes down, it's a 3/4, so it's a bigger body, but we also get to make the Orc Army token, which can be potentially reasonably big. Yeah, there goes another Advisor. Opponent gets in. We're going to tap down our Petitioner. They get another card. And that's game. Unfortunate. Yeah. The value that the Ishin produces is pretty nuts. Did we have fun? Yeah, that was fine. That was an okay game. I'm not upset about that. Opponent just was able to see more cards than we could, and ended up getting there, you know. But on to the next one. Alrighty. Let's see if the advisors can bring it home this time. So we have 3 lands, double Watery Grave, Takenuma. We only have 2 advisors, however, double Go for the Throat could be very useful here. Kind of buy us some time to find those additional advisors if we need them. We're going to play the Grave Tap. Opponent has 2 forests, so they could just be mono green here. We're going to play our island. We're going to play our first Petitioner. So opponent definitely looks like mono green. However, they're so far being a very slow mono green. Voracious Hydra, when it enters the battlefield, they're going to double their counters. Cool. We will go ahead and play the Watery Grave. Play Corrupt Court Official. Make them discard a card. So we're not too worried about the Hydra at the moment. We do have Go for the Throats to help take care of it later if we need to. We're just going to go ahead and pass the turn for now. Opponent plays another Forest. And another Voracious Hydra. They're going to go ahead and double the counters on that one. Sure. Opponent's going to go ahead and pass. We're going to make them mill a card. Bye-bye Forest. We will play Takenuma here. We're actually going to go ahead and pass the turn. We could play 2 Persistent Petitioners and start milling. However, I want to clear this board up a little bit. So Garruk's Uprising, whenever it enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. So we're going to go ahead and go for the Throat the first Voracious Hydra. So that way they don't draw the card. Go ahead and pass to combat. And we're going to go ahead and get rid of the second Hydra. Go to our turn. And then run out our Petitioners. Pass the turn. And now we get to start milling. Opponent plays a Leafkin Druid. And they pass the turn. We're going to go ahead and tap 4 of our advisors here. And mill them for 12. Draw a card. We're going to play another Persistent Petitioners. And pass the turn. So we're going to leave up double opt here. Get to look at a couple cards. Opponent plays Iron Scale Hydra. If it would deal combat damage, if a creature would deal combat damage to it, prevent it, and it gets +1/+1 counters. Opponent gets to draw their card. We're going to go ahead and opt. We're going to leave that Go for the Throat on top. We're going to go ahead and opt again. And we're going to leave that Go for the Throat on top. We're going to go ahead and mill our opponent. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opponent's down to 21 cards. We draw another Petitioner. We will hold the Petitioner. We're going to pass the turn. We want to leave the Go for the Throats up. But ideally here, we're just going to go for the Throat the Iron Scale Hydra. Keep them from being able to attack with that. Opponent plays Garruk. So they can reveal the top card of the library. If it's a creature card, they can put it into their hand. Otherwise, they put it on the bottom of their library. -2 is a creature deals damage equal to its power to another target creature. So we're going to go ahead and go for the Throat the Hydra now. Let the Garruk resolve. So they can go ahead and reveal the top card. We're going to go ahead and And then top 4 advisors and mill. Opponent reveals. They get an Elvish Mystic. So our opponent can play the Mystic if they want here. Opponent's got 6 cards left in their library. We're going to go ahead and just mill them out. Tap 4 advisors, mill them for all they got, and pass the turn. Opponent draws a card. Opponent dies. GG, opponent. Okay, so all said and done, the advisors, they showed up to play today, baby. We were able to showcase the power of the advisors themselves. Not really a ton of support cards in this deck. The advisors, you know, they really carried their weight. They got there in the end with Persistent Petitioners really being the backbone of this deck. Bruvac coming in a couple times to kind of accelerate our mill. And then Mouth of Sauron to kind of put everything over the top in the end. All in all, the deck was fun. Very easy to pilot. You know, you're just trying to count the 4 advisors and then start milling your opponent. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this week. If you enjoyed the video, once again, please give it a like. If you want to see any particular tribes, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day.